It's 7 o'clock on a Sunday night. You know what that means. It's Topical starts right now. Very good evening to South African, those watching around the world. My name is Herman. This is It's Topical, our digital audience with us tonight. Among them, our guests, Herman, Mashaba, ActionSA. Good to have them on the program. Our digital audience will weigh in terms of some of the burning questions for our guests in a short while. Illegal mining, once again, in sharp focus. The Stilfontein situation, throwing the issue into the spotlight. Over 80 people dead since August last year. Over 1,000 others were brought to the surface alive. Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Kgotso, said if you go and steal gold, it's your responsibility. And basically, the person that drives you to go there, the person who sent you there. Illegal mining in South Africa presents challenges that I guess it needs to be addressed from a range of perspectives, right? Which leads us to the umbrella question of the week. And we're asking you, what sort of lessons can be drawn from the Stillfontein incident to inform future governmental responses to illegal mining? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this at SABC News_TV. Let's walk and talk. Let's get you some context. The question is, as well, that's been floating around, who should be held accountable for those 80 people that died? What is the best way to end illicit mining? Let us know. Send us your thoughts at SABC News_TV. Perspective coming up. All right, let's tee up the discussion for you. As always, we head to the magic wall, what we know and why it matters. I'm going to give you some numbers. This is where it stands with regards to the Stilfontein retrieval update. Over 1,900 miners resurfaced. And this is since August last year, right? This number, though, is concerning. 87 people dead. The question again, who should be held responsible? You heard what the Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources said. If you want to go and plan and steal gold, it's your responsibility. Also going on to say it's also the responsibility of those who sent you there. What do you make of that comment? Let us know. Now, I want to talk to you about, this is the other thing that's been popping up in terms of being topical, the nationalities of those that were found underground, arrested illegal miners. As you can see, the majority of those are Mozambicans, 1,125. Close to 500 Zimbabweans. Lesotho nationals sits at 200. South Africans, 26. Malawians, Congolese, one apiece. That's the nationalities. Now, these were the headlines that did its rounds over the past couple of weeks, right? In terms of the post-retrieval developments. Miners facing legal action. Suspected ringleaders arrested. Also, civic groups calling for an inquiry in murder charges. Should we have an inquiry in terms of the exact cause of the deaths? Operation Vala Mgodi, closed holes. What do you make of it? Is it working? Can it be sharpened in any way? Also, the process of identifying bodies underway. We will discuss that in greater detail. But I want to give you a sense of what we're dealing with currently. Police have confiscated items ranging from 640 kilograms of gold. Tiny, roll the audio cue. 640 kilograms of gold, bearing material. 6.2 kilograms of refined gold. Also explosives, firearms and cash amounting to 52.9 million rand while combating crime in Stilfontein since December 2023. Now this makes the area one of the main illicit mining hotspots in the country. SABC News reporter Topical Pakedi, as well as video journalist Mzwakhe Shabalala, reflects on how this all unfolded. Take a look.
Hundreds of illegal miners started to resurface from the Margaret shaft in November. Shaft 11, the center of the operation, is over 2 kilometers deep. Illegal miners could not resurface on their own. Some community members volunteered to retrieve them using a pulley system. They retrieved 34 illegal miners and 9 bodies by December. Their efforts were halted as government started to implement its own retrieval operation. However, there was a delay in the actual retrieval of illegal miners.
We've wasted 2 days now. Since this thing they are doing, the government saying that they are busy fixing the road for everything to happen. But since we started this operation, we have managed to save 10 people, 11 people. We managed to retrieve 1 body. You see, that's why we are saying our operation was much faster, and it gave us the good results. Every time we send the rope, it came out with the person. Every time we send the rope, it came out with the person. So the statement that is made by the law enforcement agency is a false statement. You cannot say people don't want to come out, and you cannot say people are not trapped, yet you are rescuing them.
At the top of the illegal miners' concerns, food supplies.
Truly, operation
This operation makes things difficult for us as Zamazamas. We ended up losing our families, our brothers underground. Other people died. Others are critically ill because they do not have food. So if there is a way, let them be helped so that they can be like me, who has been rescued.
We are here to say it is their right to be given food, especially based on the conditions that they are underground. We have written a letter through human rights lawyers to the MEC as the chairperson of the committee and the head of the safety, community safety in the province. We've written a letter to him and SABC to request them to give the people underground food that will sustain them whilst they are waiting.
The Society for the Protection of Our Constitution then approached the High Court in Pretoria to force the government to provide illegal miners with food and medication. This bid was rejected. Government was adamant that they would not surrender to their demands.
Are you allowing food supplies for them, or what is going to happen?
Oh, no, we are not going to do that thing. We are not going to do that thing. The focus now is on the operation, because through the police process of questioning the miners, that the illegal miners, we need to emphasize that these people, they are not miners, they are illegal miners. That resurfaced, they indicated to us that the food that we sent last week Saturday, they were not shared amongst the illegal miners. They were confiscated by the gangs that are leading the operation.
By the end of December, a letter alleged to be from underground indicated that there's cannibalism underground. An illegal miner that the SABC spoke to in January 2025 confirmed the reports.
Definitely true.
Definitely true, it happened. They ate cockroaches, they even ate bodies of dead people. We were told it's pork. However, remember, since we went underground, we've never seen pork meat underground in shaft 10. I went in through shaft 10 and resurfaced at shaft 11.
Phase 3 and the final stage of the retrieval operation then started on the 13th of January.
This operation is underway for 10 days from yesterday. Then after 10 days, we'll stop to assess. Now, any indicator or indication that it still has to go on, or there are still people who are underground, or whatever, we will take on board until we are more than reasonably satisfied that we've done everything reasonable.
It's a quite advanced machine that we're using. The cage has got a camera at the bottom, it's got a camera inside the cage and also on the top. The one at the bottom and the top we use to guide ourselves as we're driving blindly in the shaft, so we can see whether there's any obstructions or whether it's safe to raise or lower the conveyance. And the camera inside the cage, we continuously monitor the condition of the people that we are busy wasting. We also make use of these cameras for communication purposes between ourselves, the hoist driver, and the people that are being loaded inside the cage.
2 community members volunteered to go underground with a cage. They retrieved 246 illegal miners and 78 bodies.
The decomposed bodies smelled very bad. Yet Mandla Charles and myself managed to put them in the body bags because we had to be strong. We cannot eat now because I saw that some of them were eating dead bodies.
Rescuers then indicated on day 4 of the operation that there was no one underground.
The camera stopped on the level when we went down this morning, just to make sure that we took out everybody yesterday. We stopped there for 2 to 5 minutes. We scanned the area visually and we also listened, and we haven't picked up any people or visuals of people that's been left behind.
More than 1,900 illegal miners were arrested.
I can confirm that from the 18th of August 2024 up until now, a total of 1,907 illegal miners have resurfaced. In terms of nationalities, we have Mozambicans, 1,125 that have been arrested. Zimbabweans, we are standing at 465. Lesotho nationals, 200. South Africans, 26. We have Malawians, 1. Congolese, 1. So 87, it's the total bodies of illegal miners that have resurfaced from the 18th of August 2024.
The question that remains is, who is buying this gold?
People are producing some produce. It goes into the market. How does it enter to the market? Because they cannot just produce for fun of it and making decorations on it in their own house. They produce to sell. Somebody is buying and somebody is refining it and making product. Where does it go? Why are we not following up the buyers from these people who are being exploited by this illegal mining, which is very unsafe?
Operation Vala Umgodi continues to unfold in 7 provinces. Deborah Pagedi, SABC News, Stillfontein.
Yeah, I guess that's the pertinent question, right? Who is buying this gold? We need to get some context on that. Many thanks to Mzwake as well as Topical for that story. Let's get the discussion on the road. You know, I must say that we did invite the Department of Minerals and Petroleum Resources as well as police. They couldn't make it for the discussion, but we're lucky to have SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Pleasure to have you on the program. We also have Herman Mashaba, ActionSA President, also Kgotso Mmadi, President of the Wesvaal Chamber of Business. We are also hoping to have Busisiwe Thabane from Benchmarks Foundation. But thank you very much indeed, our digital audience as well. Please raise your virtual hand if you have any comments, questions for our guests. I'll do my very best to get you onto the program, get your thoughts onto the program. Mr. Vavi, maybe I can start with you. In hindsight, the handling of this whole situation in Stilfontein, what do you make of it?
A monumental disaster, a total human tragedy, a disaster and catastrophe that should have been avoided, a massacre and a premeditated murder. That's our view. And we're not saying that from anger. We saying that from the following. 1, government started this operation in 2023 already, intensified it in August of 2024. We went to Stilfontein at a time when most of the illegal mine workers, zamazamas, whatever you want to call them from your perspective, we're now being forced to leave because they have been starved of food and water as a result of that operation. By the 21st, government, as a result of a court order, had already announced that it was launching 3 phases of a rescue operation, which was to include sending down a camera, as well as bringing down a special cage to bring them up. That was on the 21st of November. It only took up to 13th of January for the cage to come down. By that time, what we're now talking about was happening. More than 80 people have died. We think that had government moved with the necessary speed in the shaft where people were unable to on their own come out, it would have saved all of the people that have died. That's the first reason. The second reason is that we've got to know why government is allowing a situation where it is unable to manage its own migration laws. When we're talking about the influx of Zimbabweans, Mozambicans, why is that so?
Are you drawing a straight line from the issues around migration policy to illegal mining?
Absolutely. There would have been no illegal mining if government was operating a tight operation to ensure that nobody is able to come willy-nilly into the republic. That's a second reason. There's a third reason. The government has about 7 to 8 pieces of legislation, from issuing a license every time a company is wanting to close down the mine, to a Health and Safety Act of the mining industry that says you must seal the mine before you close down, to the National Environmental Act that says this is how you should go about ensuring that you sort out the environment and that you make sure that the mine is such that people can still live around it after it has been closed. That is not happening, or it is happening in such a scale that it makes no difference. At the end, there are 6,100 mines that have been abandoned in South Africa that have not been properly sealed, opening the space for anybody to just go in.
Herman, Mashaba, strong words being used by Zwelinzima Vavi. Agree, disagree?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity. Look, to some extent, I agree with Date Vavi on some of the aspects. Where I disagree with him is to call this murder, because these people went into these mines voluntarily. They were not really forced by anyone. So I think to put the blame squarely on government and the people of South Africa, because obviously if you blame the government, you actually blame all of us as as citizens of this country. Where I agree with him, it's obviously where I put government also responsible for this, for compromising the rule of law in our country. This open border policy where they've made South Africa the capital city of crime, and allowing international criminal syndicates to use our country as their playground. And so Home Affairs has to take the responsibility, including our entire criminal justice system that's actually failing our country.
Kgotso Mmadi, the Constitution, Section 1011, talks to the issues of life and dignity. I wonder, how do you balance the need to protect life and dignity with the need to pursue and stamp out illegal mining?
Good evening, Blaine, and good evening to my fellow panelists and to the viewers at home. As the Wesvaal Chamber of Business, may I start by expressing and passing our condolences to the families of those who lost their loved ones. As the chamber, what especially we are directly affected, being in the area of Stilfontein, we must understand that South Africa is a constitutional democracy. We live by the prescripts of the law. And we all understand that in our country, in order for you to operate any mine, you must be granted a licensing. Yes. So we firstly want to say that from our side, we need to understand that we need to encourage the fact that we need to uphold the rule of law. Right. And secondly, any loss of life, no matter how it happened, needs to be investigated thoroughly and transparently. So, are
you calling for a formal inquiry into the deaths of the 80 people?
I definitely, we cannot just be leaving it like that. Obviously, there is a lot that needs to be uncovered. You see, what happened, it will enable us even to unearth those whom we so-called kingpins, because really there are people who benefited at the expense of those who went underground. and they are living luxurious life. We need, and it is such investigations that will be able to reveal such, and it is only a transparent inquiry or a transparent investigation. And by the way, we have competent, law enforcement agencies in South Africa that can deal with that. So from our side, we need to make sure that at least we allow the law to take its course, and each and everyone who has got evidence to suggest otherwise must bring it forth so that it should be thoroughly tested, because the country or the constitution allows us to have such processes.
You say the law takes its course. Busi Thabane, I wonder, does the current laws in South Africa have teeth to deal with illegal mining?
Hi, good evening, and good evening to everybody. That is a very complicated question. As we have said as the Benchmarks Foundation, that part of the reason that where we find ourselves here today is because some of the laws have not been observed. Firstly, we have to say that the issue of the improper treatment and closure of these mines is a problem. It's law that when the mining company operates, they have to plan for the closure of the mine. As they operate, they have to make sure that what they're going to do at the end is their responsibility to properly close the mine, to properly rehabilitate the environment, to look at the social impacts, to make sure that the local economy is sustained. And there's also
is it sitting at the unclosed mines, the disused mines? Is it sitting at around 6,000, as Mr. Vavi mentioned earlier on? Is that the number you have as well?
Yes, that's true.
6,000.
Yes. That's correct, and that was verified by the Auditor General in her report in 2023 as well. So that is the problem that we're sitting with. And it's also the responsibility of government to ensure that these mining companies abide by the law as well. So that is part of the reason why we find ourselves here today. And this is all still continuing even today. We still see mining companies just closing or selling to smaller mining companies that do not have the expertise to run these mines and to close them. Because when you open a mine, you already have to plan for the closure of the mine, because as we know, minerals are not renewable. So as you mine, you also have to plan on how you're going to close it.
Right. Let's go to a digital audience. I'll come back to you, Mr. Vavi. Let's speak to Tepiso. Tepiso?
Good evening, Blaine, and to the rest of the panel and viewers from home. I think I definitely agree with the rest of the panels on the legislature, on mining and so forth. However, I bring in an insight of, for the future, how about then we look at artisanal mining and to equip the people who volunteer to go underground and fend for themselves with proper training on how you can go underground and mine. The Department of Mining, in collaboration with the Department of Trade and Competition, could potentially look at having legislation or policies that enable artisanal mining. Because if you look at all these foreign nationals and our South African people who came or who are at Stilfontein are members of the SADC, meaning we have our fellow nations who really see the importance of having the minerals that we have here in South Africa, which is the part where I put forth. How about we now start thinking about having artisanal mining as an industry on its own?
Well, Mr. Vavi, the full implementation of the 2022 policy on artisanal mining and small-scale mining, if fully implemented, does it make an impact, a dent in terms of illegal mining?
It will. If all of our laws were to be implemented, we will not be sitting here to start with. If every piece of legislation, and a lot of our laws are very progressive, no doubt about it, but the critical challenge we are facing is that we say all of these beautiful things in the speeches, but in the practical reality, that's not what our people are experiencing.
Why?
Because there is no leadership. There is lack of leadership from top to bottom. There is no leadership. That's your crisis. Now, I just want to in reinforcing the point that Kgotso is making. Thank you very much, Kgotso, for that remark. We are a constitutional democracy. And I've heard people all over the social media saying we should have long put a concrete slap and forget about those people. They deserve to die. Sorry, Herman, don't go to that direction, please. Don't say the people who were there were not invited. Of course, they were not invited. They were desperately poor to be abused by the crooks that nobody is willing to talk about except Tsepiso and Musi. There are people behind this industry who are benefiting. And you have to ask yourself a fundamental question, by the way. How is it possible that this industry, according to the minister, is generating 60 billion rands every year? How is it possible that everybody admit that part of our biggest problem is that these informal operations, Zama, are feeding into the underworld industry of very rich people sitting all over the world. Your question is, how do they move this gold from Stilfontein and all over other mines into the harbor? And how does it get out of the harbor into Europe? And for us to then receive reports from the United Nations that says South Africa is losing 1.1 trillion rands through illicit cash outflows and mispricing, mainly through the mining industry. Where is the intelligence? Why people are incorrect when they're saying the state is involved in this? Surely some of the police that have been corrupted are benefiting from this. And what makes us to be even more suspicious is how misinformation has been used to mislead people into believing that really there was an easy way out of those mines voluntarily. No, people have been fed misinformation, and unfortunately they believe it because they have not been into that area. They just don't know that these mines are not connected to one another. They don't know that the only way out of shaft 11 is through shaft 10. And the information we're getting now is that actually it takes 3 to 4 days to crawl on your elbows to go to shaft number 10. And shaft 10 is actually a death trap. That's where most of these people died from, because it takes 3 days to move from the bottom to the surface.
Mr. Mashaba, you want to respond?
Since when is government actually now representing you, Herman? Come on.
Mr. Mashaba?
I think the government is acting on your behalf. Since when? Are you not an opposition party?
Well, I think that Vavi, your issue here is trying to justify you want to legalize illegality, and I think as a country, if we're going to operate,
how are we condoning and how are we legitimizing?
Mr. Vavi, let Mr. Mashaba answer.
How are we legitimizing? How have we condoned?
Mr. Vavi, let Mr. Mashaba finish his point.
Mr. Vavi, we've given you a chance, we've listened to you, so if you can give us a chance as well.
Go ahead, sir.
What I'm trying to say is that I think what you're articulating, basically, you are saying to us as South Africans that the only way this countries operate is to legalize illegality. Tell me, Mr. Vavi, are you aware in 3 weeks' time will be commemorating the death of Priti Nkambule, Yvonne Nisi, and Solomon Rende in Barberton, murdered by mine management with the Department of Minerals and Energy. Right now, I've not really had, it's 9 years already. These 3 law-abiding, hard-working South Africans were murdered. And I've not really had South Africans actually making the kind of noise that we've really experienced over the last few months with people who went there voluntarily, because we must never move from the fact that these people went there voluntarily. They were not forced by anyone. But the 3 Lily mine workers, these ones were murdered. A court judgment wants people to be, the mine management to be prosecuted. I would still have to really hear from you and those who believe in the rule of law and believe in human rights, because you're talking on the basis of talking about human rights. Human rights cannot really be selective. If we talk about human rights, then let's talk about human rights across all
Mr. Vavi, hold your thoughts. I'll come back to you in a short while. Howard, I want to hear from you, then Nom, then Larato. Let's hear from you, Howard.
Yes, good evening. Let me try to help both Mr. Mashaba and Mr. Vavi in this regard, with particularly the rule of law. Because firstly, we must determine that these people whom we are dealing with here are illegal miners, and that alone is criminality. Now, the fact that they can be afforded human rights doesn't mean that we must automatically justify their criminality in that instance, or that criminal activity. And earlier on, Mr. Blaine, you asked a question that Section 11, Section 10, the rights to life that are enshrined in the Constitution, what must be done in order to equate that or to justify that in relation to these illegal miners? The very same Constitution gives us an answer to that question, that by way of Section 36, which is the limitation clause, it stipulates that there must be a law of general application in order to limit certain rights. And of course, one might say that the right to human dignity and the right to life cannot be limited just like that. Of course, they are non-derogable rights. What must happen is that government must provide ways that are very less causing of harm in order to avert this issue of criminal or criminality, especially illegal mining in this aspect.
Right.
So now, what happens is that the government, we must firstly ask whether or not have they taken steps that were very harsh to the harshest extent, or that were very less, in order to achieve that particular idea that we want, which is the rule of law to reign supreme. So that must be the question. And from my point of view, I would say that the government has done wonderfully in this regard by dealing with those issues, especially illegal mining. Thank you, Blaine.
Thank you, Howard. Norm, let me hear from you, then Lerato.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I think I'd like to go back to the conversation surrounding these 6,100 abandoned mines. We aren't speaking really about how we're going to achieve closing these mines. It's saying, the government is saying 16 years. It's going to take 16 years. We're now in the 17th year. Are we going to the 19th to 20th? When are we going to start with the process? And what does the law say about rehabilitating these mines and the government taking the onus upon itself?
Right. No, before I go to Lerato, let me go to Busi just to help us understand it. Whose responsibility is it to rehabilitate these mines?
Well, the first responsibility sits with the mining company, because as a mining company, when you get a license to operate, as I mentioned earlier, you also have to start to plan for when you close the mine, when the mining operations come to the end of life. You have to do that. So that is in the Mineral Petroleum Act, as it states. But unfortunately, what we see is happening is that mining companies do not take that responsibility. They either just leave the mines and they disappear. And this is why we say that is when then government comes in, the Department of Minerals, they have to enforce their own laws to make sure that these mining companies are tracked and they need to do what they are meant to do.
Right. Lerato, let me bring you in. Your question?
Thank you very much. First, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I can hear you. Am I audible?
We are battling a bit to hear you, but let's give it a try one more time.
Okay, so greetings to all the online attendees and everybody. I think the conversation here should be that
Okay, Lerato, I'm battling. I'm not sure if we can clear up that line. I'm so sorry. Maybe let's take a quick break. We've got a lot to discuss with regards to finding plausible solutions to the issue of illegal mining stemming from what's happening in Stilfontein. The umbrella question is, what sort of lessons can we learn? We'll take a quick break. We'll try to clear up Lerato's line and get our guests to comment as well. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical, SABC News, indeed throwing the spotlight on illegal mining. We need to find some plausible solutions to this issue. We can't be talking about this every year and still going through some of the issues that we're facing. We saw what happened in Stillfontein, 80 people dead. How do we better respond to situations like that? I want to hear from you as well. Our regular Word on the Street feature, we took to various streets of Johannesburg to better understand the public's opinion on illegal mining and potential solutions. This is what you had to say. Take a look.
I
think there's bigger people involved. The fact that these mines are not protected, basically illegal miners have carte blanche to do whatever they want to go in whenever they want to. It's something that needs interventions from government, right? There's obviously a market for this. It's sad that people have lost their lives, but I think the absence of security protocol has made it just so easy for them to go in.
The government could do better, in deploying, police or soldiers or something, and get those mines sealed off, so just to prevent less deaths.
Those ones who went there illegally, it's not acceptable in the country. So they must learn a lesson, because if we're going to keep on pampering them like this, we're going to hear more stories of this sort.
Even though they went there illegally, maybe it's because sometimes our government, sometimes they don't really take something serious. Maybe you raise a point that there is a certain mine somewhere with minerals. Can we go there to do a research on the minerals? And then they just don't care.
We do appreciate your thoughts on this matter. I want to bring in Kgotso very quickly to just better understand the issue of mining. Kgotso, large-scale industrial mining, is it still profitable in South Africa, considering the costs that goes into extracting these minerals? Should there be a greater focus on small-scale mining?
Blaine, thank you so much. And then I want to go back to what you say. We can go and talk, but finally we must face reality that we need a solution to all this. And all of us here, God has given us the wisdom for us to find a solution. In terms of your question, it depends on the mineral or the commodity that you are mining, and the expense or the machinery that is required to mine. But the lesson that we draw as business from this particular incident is that truly, if people could go down and get gold, there is gold. Now, we need to go to an extent to say, can we then get at least a renewed quantity survey to see, in order, is there gold? If yes, what is required for us to be able to mine? Thirdly, are there people, investors who are willing to come and join, And last importantly, we must be able to say to government, the green paper is there. Can we speed up the process of ensuring that the small scale mining, artisanal mining, are recognized, legally? And once we do that, we are going to avoid them being exploited, and we are going to ensure that our people are formally employed. And believe you me, all the world have seen that there is gold in Stillfontein, but you look at the town Stilfontein, it's quite bleak, because the mineral went through illegal way. Now it is then an opportunity for us to say, how do we then make sure that the minerals that will be extracted from that particular mine go the legal route, and we nip it in the bud to say those who have been enjoying at the expense of our people, we ensure that we cut that umbilical cord so that they must not be able to operate. And again, the law must be firm where it is necessary. We have brilliant laws, and we only need one thing from our government: execution, and execution decisively.
Point taken. We're looking for practical solutions, Herman Mashaba. I wonder, is there room to harness miners' economic potential while at the same time targeting the criminal bosses?
Absolutely, and highly possible. I think it depends on the political will of the government of the day, because obviously if you have the breakdown of the rule of law in a country, then unfortunately you end up attracting criminality in the process. if there's an opportunity for people to really be mining, then please allow them to mine. But it must be done in a legal manner, ensuring that health and safety measures are also taken into consideration. Because I'm afraid you are all aware at the moment some of the dangers in terms of deep mining. So all these factors must be taken into consideration when granting license for people to go down. Will they be able to survive? Because we don't want, as government, take the responsibility of allowing people with no capacity to go to 2-3 kilometers down without having the necessary protection. As you are aware, during the dark days of our country's history, we used to lose a lot of our people who used to work in the mines. So we've got to really be careful. We cannot have a repeat of putting the lives of our people at danger because there is potential for some people to really make money.
And Zwelinzima, Vavi, the Constitution should lead us on this matter. But do you think that it creates more complex issues around the approach of government's approach in order to deal with illegal mining?
No, the Constitution is very clear. Section 10 guarantees everyone's who lives within the borders of South Africa a right to dignity. Section 11 gives us a right to life. Howard, you are wrong. I thought that you were really going to help us. Those rights are regarded as core rights by the Constitutional Court ruling. That's why we don't have a death penalty in South Africa. It was outlawed by the Constitutional Court when it interpreted those two rights as actually the cornerstones of the Constitution of South Africa in the first place. So it is misleading to keep on telling people that these rights are limited. You cannot suspend the right to life and dignity. You cannot postpone it, or you cannot reinterpret it even during the emergency. It is as in the Constitution.
Right.
It's guaranteed. So that's the first point I think that we must just emphasize. The second point is, let me go back to the point. We've got to address not the symptoms of the crisis. We've got to address the real source of where is the problem coming from. Here's where the problem is coming from. Number one, South Africa will not develop as an island of prosperity surrounded by the sea of poverty. We've long called for an RDP, a reconstruction and development of not just our region, but of our African continent. As long as South Africa is seen as a land of honey, wrongly, by the way, by everybody in the continent, they will go to it because light attracts everybody without sitting in the darkness. I'm now using just a saying. So no matter how many volts of electricity you can put up around our borders, as long as there's so much desperation in our region, people will find ways of coming. I'm not saying that we must not stop them. The migration laws must be implemented full 100%, but that's your first real long-term solution. The second solution is to hold the mining industry accountable. This thing that is happening in Valamgo, this should not be led by the police to start with. This is an operation of the Mineral and Energy Department using the plethora of legislation that it has to ensure that when mines are closed, they are sealed, environment is protected, and so forth and so forth. Thirdly, you cannot stop the illegal mining unless you accept the reality. It's just a reality like what you call the cannabis industry in South Africa. Loads and loads of people were arrested, spent all of their lives. But eventually, the government have to come to its senses that you're not going to stop this thing as long as it generates money. The informal mining, Tsepo is right, so Kgotso is right, it is generating money. We are told that 20% of all profits all over the world are coming from the small informal mining sectors of the economy, regulated, hand it over to our communities, allow them to generate living out of it, but make sure, Herman is right, that our people do not get exposed to such dangerous working conditions.
Howard, the norm? Howard?
Thank you very much, Mr. Blaine. Perhaps I'll be more clear at this time. The point I was making is that the human rights as you have it, of course, these people are guaranteed by the Constitution. Hence, I said they are non-derogable rights. They cannot be limited. However, at the end of the day, these people are criminals. They are mining illegally, and government somehow must deal with that. Now, I did say that how government has dealt with it now by way of infusing ways that are causing less harm for these individuals to eventually come out. That is the correct way in which government should carry out this particular activity, so that at the end of the day, the rule of law is the one that is reigning supreme, and then we do away with criminality. Right. Now, the point which is that these rights are human rights does not necessarily mean that you can just go out and do something wrong, and just because you've got the right to life, you must walk away free. Government must do something about it. And of course, the Constitution, as I said earlier, has all the answers to that particular question. Thank you very much.
All right, Howard, thank you. Nom, then Tsepiso. Nom?
Thank you very much, Blaine. I think some of the issues that we should also look at, or the challenges rather, the strategic challenges in policing, impaired relations with SADC countries, which we've already mentioned, really is part of the bigger problem, because we send some of these people back to their country. You know, they get arrested, they get sent back. Home Affairs then is faced with the same issue at the border again. So it's like we're not necessarily stopping the problem. We find a quick solution. People were arrested, people are taken back, but then they come back again. So part of our relations with the SADC countries also need to be really strengthened. Right. And I think it's part of the government's onus to do that as well.
Yeah, the wider issue. Tsepiso?
I think I'll go to the practicalizing of this whole artisanal mining issue. I think we should start mainly at looking at, we have above 6,000 mines that are abandoned already. How about the government sets a goal of rehabilitating 30 mines within the coming 5 years, which will enable the process of then small-scale mining to increase, which also increases the profits in percentage of those who used to give into the mining markets. Yeah. And you can achieve this actually through the G20 presidency as we currently have it, which is also going to be beneficial due to the economic forum that's coming up in Switzerland in the coming days. I think President Ramaphosa has a large opportunity that he can lobby in investment into the country to be able to assist us in putting forth a more sustainable and regulated process of equipping these artisanal miners. So firstly, with that will then be increasing employment, which is one of the targets that I think South Africa's economic development plan has. It's to reduce unemployment. Will that be also looking at increasing our GDP, for example? It's been stagnant and stayed at negative 3% for the last 2-3 quarters, if not 4 as a whole. And then with that, the other thing that comes into play is taxation. Government can only generate revenue through the fiscal policy by either decreasing spending or increasing taxation. Right. But if you have a large market of people who are working, they can then be taxed, which means government can have more income coming in to distribute it into other departments. Right. So that's what I'm saying. As much as all these departments that are interrelated need to sit down and form proper statutory that allows us to economically develop as a country. Right. Like you've said, South Africa is seen as the honey of the continent in Africa. All these people are going to keep on coming here up until we have regulatory measures in place that allows them to work here but still serve our state and not theirs specifically.
Well,
so this can be partnerships.
I get you. To carry on your analogy, how do we cut off the sweet spot, Busi Thabane? Explain to us the actual process of closing these shafts, these disused mines. Why isn't it happening at a pace that will make a fundamental difference?
Well, as I've said before, mining companies really do not plan to close these mines. And closing these mines and rehabilitating the environment is a very long process, because you're literally looking at about 10 years when you're seeing that your mine is coming to the end of its life, maybe 5 years prior to you actually ending operations, this is when you start planning to close your mine. And that involves the actual physical securing the shaft and all of that. But as I've mentioned, also rehabilitating the environment. Mining is very brutal on the environment. You're also looking at sustaining the local economies, because when a mine is operating in a certain economy in the community, they depend on the mining operations, on the value chain from that will come from the mining operations.
Yeah.
So closing down this, it also involves the surrounding communities as well, and to see how do you train, how do you sustain the local activities as well, so that the economies can keep running.
Right.
And we've seen this happening now. We've seen ghost towns in the Free State, towns like Virginia, towns like Welkom. When we are saying that the infrastructure that were used by the previous mining companies is still there, and now we have to start to plan the transition from large-scale mining to small and medium-scale mining, still using the same infrastructure where it is available. And where it is not, we really need to look at investing in it.
Herman, Mashaba, how should we, from your point of view, deal with derelict and ownerless mines?
Well, I think, as I have indicated previously, is a question of the political will. If you don't have government that is in government with a mandate to serve society, unfortunately, we're going to end up with the situation we're in at the moment. So I think mining, it's a great opportunity, as some of the fellow speakers are saying, huge opportunity, but it must be done in a formalized legal manner where we can attract investments in our country, including obviously unleashing the potential of our own investors in South Africa. So it is highly possible, but it will require government that is actually committed to the rule of law and ensure that we follow our constitution properly. And at the same time, close our borders for people to come into our country, to come here legally, and when they're here, to respect our laws. But if we're going to talk about looking after everybody else and we end up forgetting about our own people, 54% of South Africans right now, as I speak to you, they live below the breadline. We have the highest sustainable unemployment rate in the world. We are the most unequal society on earth. The countries that we are thinking of helping, I can tell you, South Africa, we are aware. We are known internationally. We are the most unequal society on earth. We have the highest sustainable unemployment rate in the world, particularly the youth, up to 60%. So I'm saying is we need a government that can recognize giving priority to South Africans and ensuring that government is actually held accountable to ensure that it services the people of its country.
The question, Zwelinzima Vavi, that Topical Paketi asked earlier on is, where is this goal going to? And I guess we need to find a way of how do we identify the ringleaders, the kingpins. That will be the main thing in order to kind of break down this. What's your solution in that regard?
We need a fully blown judicial commission to investigate this. 80 people are not rats. They're not cockroaches. It is human life that we have lost here, 80 people. We need a commission of inquiry. It must find out who are the real beneficiaries of this industry. How is it linking to the illicit cash outflows? It must find out who employs the people who go out to Lesotho, Mozambique, to recruit these people to come into South Africa. Who pays these people? And how does it link to this illicit mineral industry that is benefiting the crooks all over the world? Yeah. We must find out how is it possible to move these minerals from these mines to the harbors and to all over the world. Surely there is a systemic problem that we are dealing with here. It's not just some flesh of Stilfontein. This is systemic all over the country, and we've got to find out how did these 80 people die. In our view, government killed them by starving them to death. So, Howard, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Government does not have a right to starve or to kill people. not under our constitution. And if indeed the Commission of Inquiry finds out that these people died out of hunger and starvation or dehydrated because of not being given water, we've got to hold certain people in government accountable. So a full-blown Judicial Commission of Inquiry to find out how did 80 people perish in our mines.
And so we said that we did invite the Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it. We'd love to have them to answer some of these questions, but thank you very much indeed for your input. Zwelinzima, Vavi, Herman, Mashaba, also Thabane, Kgotso, Mmadi, thank you so much. Our digital audience, pleasure as always, value added. These conversations will continue, but I guess we unearthed or fleshed out some of the possible solutions. Let's hopefully hope that it can be carried forward. Thank you very much indeed for your time. All right, before we go, here's my take. And look, just listening to how people are reacting to the Stilfontein situation, and you get a sense that people's opinions are divided, right? Polarizing views. On one hand, there's indifference. On the other, there's concern. But surely, for the sake of progress, there can be a middle ground. Because often, when the us and them gives way to the we, that's where we find progress. How do we balance preserving life and dignity with the wider problem of illegal mining? The promise of striking gold remains a magnet for many people. So Stilfontein should instill a sense of urgency in government, the private sector, and civil society to find practical solutions to illegal mining. We have to have clear eyes about alternatives. And for that, we need the head and the heart to meet in order to embody change. And that's my take. If you missed anything on this program, then be sure to watch It's Topical on YouTube. Trends Travel is up next. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.